You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium. Available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's hospital saga.
The Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital, which is located in the Gwangju province of South Korea, has gained a reputation not only for its abandoned architecture, but also for the frightening stories, its hauntings, and various other paranormal phenomena, which has given many paranormal investigators brown underwear for many years. When it was originally built in the late 1970s, this psychiatric facility was once a place for the mentally ill. However, it was shut down in the late 1990s and it has slowly fallen into disrepair and has now become a popular site for urban explorers and ghost hunters. The local and the national media likes to reduplicate the hospital's legends of mysterious deaths, mad doctors who were just as insane as the cases they were dealing with, murderous patients, dark shadowy figures and phantom nurses who wander aimlessly through its dark corridors at night. But despite all these reports of paranormal phenomena, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was in fact closed and abandoned in the late 1990s for far more mundane reasons than the stories would have you believe. In the end, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was forced to close its doors, primarily due to the economic downturn of the time and the unsanitary conditions of the building. But its main problem was its sewage disposal system, and as this problem continued to grow, and no doubt so did its aroma, the owner of the building left the country and did not leave any documentation behind about the land or the structures on it. So, the money ran out, and eventually the hospital had to close its doors, and it has been abandoned ever since. Unless, of course, you count the numerous tourists, camera crews and ghost hunters. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this sewage-swirling episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man with a very dark and disturbed sense of humour, who lets strangeness dominate his life because, let's face it, who wants to be ordinary anyway? But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every episode, usually on a Tuesday night, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, and the occasional missing person that goes unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of this episode's subject matter that I can reply to, a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. Or, if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the story surrounding the abandoned Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. And this week's necessary disclaimer. Well, this story is a tale that sadly involves... Well, to be honest with you, this tale is pretty much PG, so sit back, grab a beer or coffee and enjoy the listening experience that I bring forth. But as usual, you listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also like to apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, it has always made me remember the proverb, "This fellow the fellow who never makes a mistake takes his orders from one who does. So, does that mean I'm self-taught? Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with the story. Back in 1982, outside Gyeonggi-do in South Korea, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was established by a gentleman named Mr. Hong. The original building was just around the 11,000 square metre mark and spread out across 3 floors, and then sometime during the early 1990s an additional 2 buildings were added, which increased its size by another 500 square metres. Then, another couple of years later, in the July of 1996, the hospital closed and was then left abandoned and neglected for over 2 decades. As I mentioned earlier in my introduction, although the media likes to report stories regarding the abandoned building of the supernatural and the ghostly insane doctors roaming the building corridors, the hospital's abandonment and eventual closure in the mid to late 1990s was due to far more down-to-earth reasons. Put simply, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was forced to close down mainly due to the economic downturn at the time, unsanitary conditions and problems with the sewage disposal system. And as the sewage problem grew to the point where the orders for Febreze went out of control, the implementation by the Water Source Protection Act in South Korea for a new sewage treatment facility suddenly became a legal requirement for the hospital, which in turn caused a disagreement between the owner and the director over whether or not it was worth the financial strain to install a new treatment facility. While talks were ongoing between the owner and the director of the site, in 1997 the elderly owner sadly passed away, so consequently a new treatment facility was never installed and the hospital remained closed. And when the former owner's son took over the place, he neglected to maintain it, and so the hospital therefore fell into disrepair. And as for the former hospital's director, as far as I can tell at the time of writing this podcast, he was alive and well at the closing of the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital and allegedly opened another psychiatric hospital in the province of Gangwon-do, east of Seoul, again in South Korea. I want to take a short break from the story here and just delve into a potted history regarding lunatic asylums in general. Well, according to the County Asylum's website, the first recorded lunatic asylum in Europe was the Bethlehem Royal Hospital in London and has been part of the city since 1247, when it was originally built as a priory or monastery under religious vows. In 1330, approximately 10 months later, the priory then became a hospital, and in 1407 it admitted its first mentally ill patients. Before the Madhouse Act of 1774, treatment of the insane was carried out by non-licensed practitioners who ran their madhouses as a commercial enterprise and with little regard for the inmates. On a quick interesting side note here, the Madhouses Act of 1774 was an act of Parliament of Great Britain that established a legal framework for regulating madhouses or insane asylums. The Act required that all madhouses be licensed by a committee of the Royal College of Physicians, with it aiming to restrict the private trade in lunacy by setting limits on the number of patients admitted and creating licences and regular inspections for madhouse properties. The Madhouse Act of 1774 established the licensing required to house insane patients, with yearly inspections of the premises taking place. In 1792, the English tradesman and philanthropist William Tuke set up York Retreat, which was the first establishment in the UK to treat their patients as human beings and offer them therapeutic sessions with the absence of any mechanical restraints, and instead used work and leisure as the main treatment regime. In 1808, the County Asylum Act was passed, which allowed counties to levy a rate to help fund the building of county asylums, with the intention to remove the insane from within the workhouses and provide them with a more sufficient and dedicated care system, more suitable to coping with their conditions. Work and recreation was central to the life within the asylums. Sport was made readily available to the patients, but walking within the grounds and woodlands was the most accessible, and as time passed, it was soon realised that other activities such as art, music and dancing were also beneficial to their welfare. Most women came to the asylums just for short periods of time, only to simply recover from the stress and exhaustion of their domestic lives, and once they were rested and relaxed, they were soon sent on their way. Women were also admitted to the asylums if they were from a problematic marriage or because of giving birth to an illegitimate child, even if it was the result of rape. Postnatal depression was also a very common reason for women to be admitted. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at how men fared in insane asylums, their eventual closure, and the 2018 movie named after the hospital itself.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
Most of the male patients within the asylum system, especially before the First World War, were often poor and or without spouses or indeed without any other family members to help look after them. And after World War I, shell shock was a prevalent condition among men admitted to the asylums. On a quick interesting side note here, shell shock was a term that originated during the First World War to describe the type of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD for short, that many soldiers experienced during the war before PTSD was officially recognised, with it encapsulating a range of symptoms exhibited by soldiers exposed to the horrors of trench warfare, which included disorientation, tremors, and emotional numbness. The term was coined by the consulting psychologist to the British Expeditionary Force Charles Mayer, and was used as an umbrella term to classify several anxiety disorders that troops suffered from, with symptoms including things like fatigue, tremor, confusion, nightmares, and impaired sight and or hearing loss. Unlike the female side of the asylums, the male sides were smaller in numbers. However, escape from the hospitals was more common with the male patients than it was with their female counterparts. But it was also noted that due to the smaller numbers of males in some of the hospitals, the men had a more stable time within the ward. OK, so the big question is, why did they all close? Well, one of the reasons was that the psychiatric hospitals had become too large, and like most things that involve money, governments, corruption and greed, the system had opened itself up to more and more abuse. In 1961, the Minister of Health at the time, Enoch Powell, was invited to speak at the AGM of the National Association for Mental Health, and in his speech he announced that the government of the day intended to eliminate by far the greater part of the country's mental health hospitals, and at the same time regional boards were then asked to ensure that no more money, other than what was absolutely necessary, was to be spent on upgrading and reconditioning the hospital buildings. However, as far as I can tell, it would take about 25 years for the hospital closures to even start. Other reasons for the decline in the large institutions was the advancement in psychiatric treatment, with this meaning that now a standard hospital was able to provide care to acute cases that required immediate attention. And not only that, but better drugs became more readily available, which meant that patients did not require the 24-hour care they had previously needed. This also meant that traditional asylums were left with fewer long-term patients to care for, with patient numbers reducing from 150,000 in 1950 to just 80,000 in 1975. Another reason for the closure of mental hospitals was the passing of the Mental Health Act 1983, which saw that people being committed to these large asylums were being given back their full rights, and thus having the ability to appeal their certification. And not only that, but it also saw the mentally deficient being moved back into the community under the care and community projects. High Royds Hospital in Ilkley, England, closed in 2003, and Severals Hospital in Colchester shut down in 1997, with many of the buildings either left derelict or with the sites being sold to developers. And, as far as I can see, the last asylum to close its doors was Runwell Hospital in Wickford, Essex, in 2010, with it being the last one in the UK from the asylum era. So, what of the movie Gonjiam Haunted Hospital? I'll try that again. What of the movie Gonjiam Haunted Asylum? Well, to be honest with you, Unexplainers, I personally haven't seen it, but I have managed to put together a small synopsis of the movie, without giving too much of the plot away, from various reviews, so forgive me if I'm not 100% accurate. Well, Gonjiam Haunted Asylum is a 2018 South Korean found-footage supernatural horror film directed by Gonjiam Psychiatric, with it being a movie based on the real-life psychiatric hospital of the same name. It stars Wo Ha-jun, Park Ji-hyun, Oh Ha-yeon, Moon Yi-won, Park Sung-gun, Yoo Ji-woon and Lee Sung-wook in the main leading roles, and I do of course apologise to any of its stars if I pronounced any of their names incorrectly. Not that that's the sort of thing I would do, of course, but anyway, I digress. The film opened theatrically around the world in 2018, and not only did it become a commercial success, but it also became the third most watched horror film in South Korea. To give you a brief synopsis, again without me giving too much away about the plot, the narrative centres around a horror web series crew that travel to an abandoned asylum for a live broadcast to garner more views and publicity. It all starts with two teenagers who are at the derelict Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital trying to open the door to what is known in the film anyway as the notorious Room 402 while streaming the action from their cell phones. But before they open the door, the two teenagers suddenly disappear. In the next scene, we meet the owner of the YouTube channel called Horror Times, who decides to transmit live from their derelict Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital in an effort to reach 1 million followers and sponsors in order to pay him $500,000 in revenue. And according to the film's narrative, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital had a notorious past, with its director having killed all the patients and then committing suicide. So the owner of the Horror Times YouTube channel then decides to join a crew of 6 other teenagers that consisted of 3 boys and 3 girls, who all then decide to spend the night at the abandoned hospital and do a live broadcast whilst there. However, what the 3 girls don't know was that the 3 boys had planted fake supernatural effects in order to scare the girls and hopefully scare the viewers as well. Boys, eh? When the boys activated the supernatural effects, the girls did indeed become startled and frightened, so much so that afterwards they wished to go home. But the boys did, however, manage to convince the already petrified ladies to stay all night with the group. It was at this point when things got a little more unexplained. As the night drew closer and the darkness crept in, suddenly and out of the blue, real supernatural activities started to happen at the abandoned Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. Before the release of the film, the owner of the Gonjiam Asylum filed a lawsuit against the film being shown in theatres, making claims that the film will have a negative effect on the sale of the abandoned building. However, in the late March of 2018, a Seoul court ruled in favour of the film being shown. After this second short break, in part 3 we will look at the types of paranormal phenomena that were witnessed at the then deserted Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital and where and how the building or the hospital is today.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
So, what of the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital's paranormal encounters? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I couldn't really find much. I mean, there is no doubt to the amount of ghost hunters and paranormal teams that have visited the area, well, certainly after the 2018 movie gave it a celebrity status. But when it comes to actual hauntings, a lot of the experiences are just hearsay. Well, except one encounter perhaps, but I'll go into that one a little bit later. There are a few reasons as to why the building was said to be haunted. For example, it was claimed that patients would apparently die without getting any clear answers from their doctors. An evil spirit was said to haunt the wards, and an insane physician who allegedly was doing something pretty nasty to his patients. It has been said that some families and even some authority figures would put people in Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital simply because they were people who wanted or needed to be forgotten. Personally, and if that is the case, I can think of a few people I would have sent there years ago. But again, I digress. One paranormal group said that when they visited one of the rooms, room number 222 to be exact, they claimed that the doors in the room kept opening and closing all by themselves, with assurances that there was no wind or draft coming from anywhere within the building. The other thing that seems to be quite popular with ghost hunters in the abandoned building, or indeed on most paranormal adventures regardless, is the use of a spirit box, where it has been claimed, while at the deserted hospital, that they have picked up some pretty clear spirit communication. On a quick but interesting side note here, spirit boxes are paranormal research devices that quickly scan through radio stations. The idea is that if there are spirits that want to communicate, they will potentially manipulate the sound waves from the radio so that a clear word or phrase cuts through the white noise. I have used spirit boxes myself, and to be honest, I have had some pretty good results over the years. The only problem I find with them is that they can be so damn noisy, but that's probably just me. There was one piece of evidence that I mentioned a little earlier on in part 3 that did spike my curiosity, and that was a photograph that shows a couple of Korean girls having something to eat in their tent late at night outside the deserted building. And to the right, as you look at the picture, you can see pretty clearly a figure of what looks like a man in the background. Now, from what I can tell, this picture was taken well before the advent of Photoshop. I think it was taken on one of the old type Kodak cameras. I mean, I'm not saying that it couldn't be faked, of course. I mean, these days anything can be manipulated. But I did find the picture kind of interesting. The only place I could find the picture is on a YouTube channel called Grazy TV, that's Grazy, where the host talks a little bit about the abandoned building. So why not take a look, see what you think. Apart from people, once they were inside the abandoned building, feeling queasy, seeing dark shadowy figures, sensing spirits following them getting into their cars when they leave the building, and getting scratches on various parts of their body. That is pretty much it. Well, what I could find anyway when it comes to any paranormal encounters at the abandoned building. After its closure, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital very quickly gained a reputation as being one of the top 3 most haunted buildings in South Korea, followed by the Newborn Garden, which is in Jaekhyun in the North Gyeonggi Province, and the Gyeongsang abandoned cobalt mine, which is located in the North Gyeongsang Province. A lot of the rumours about the abandoned building appear to have been stemmed from the South Korean television show called Solve with the Logic of PD Lee Young-don, that's it, which had an episode featuring the reported hauntings at Gonjiam. But it wasn't until an article about the deserted building was published by CNN in 2012 that the hospital really gained its reputation as being haunted. And from what the constant groups of strangers or ghost hunters visiting the town at night, this made a lot of local townsfolk feel understandably unsafe in their own homes. And not only that, but it also created a lot of unnecessary work for the local police, who kept receiving countless calls to investigate the break-ins at the abandoned hospital. As with many abandoned buildings around the world, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital suffered from a constant flow of trespassers. So in order to deter people from entering the site, security cameras, barbed wire and notices that threaten legal action, which were written in both Korean and English, were added to the front gates of the land in an attempt to discourage unwanted visitors. But the discouragement tactics didn't end there. Oh no. Authorities also decided to have security guards patrol the site regularly and have Google Maps suspend street view for the stretch of road in front of the main gate. However, none of these deterrents worked, and if someone wanted to get inside, they were going to find a way. The determination of paranormal investigators, often matched but never beaten, especially when an abandoned building looks as dark, dismal and run down as the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. But again, I digress. So, in regard to all the rumours of missing staff, missing and murdered patients and insane doctors going around doing medical experiments on their subjects, was any of it true? Well, according to a journalist who was doing a scoop on the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital at the time, they found that there had been no evidence over the years of anything suspicious about the place at all. So essentially, or potentially, depending on how you look at it of course, nothing about the legends that surround the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital are actually true. And in fact, upon further investigation, I found that the patients that resided in Gonjiam on a more permanent nature were supposedly transferred to Yongin Mental Hospital after the place closed down. On the 28th of May in 2018, the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was finally demolished. And although the legend of the former psychiatric hospital and its hauntings are still going strong, the building itself no longer exists. So for those budding ghost hunters and thrill seekers who want to make celebrities of themselves whilst in the building by taking pictures and videos while they make various memes, you can't. It's not there. Tough egg. Instead, you'll have to make do with movies, pictures, countless homemade YouTube docs, like this one, and various bits of old footage. And ironically enough, 2018 was not only the year that the building was demolished, but it was also the same year that the movie Gonjiam Haunted Asylum came out, which could be one of the reasons as to why the legend has kept going. As far as I can tell, as at the time of writing this new show anyway, there are plans that the demolished site may become the home to a new apartment block, but only time will tell.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next show, show number 143, we are going to be looking at the fire at the Dupont Plaza Hotel. On New Year's Eve in 1986, 3 disgruntled employees at the Dupont Plaza Hotel in San Juan, Puerto Rico, intentionally set a fire. The fire killed between 96 and 98 people and injured 140 others, making it the most catastrophic hotel fire in Puerto Rican history and the second deadliest hotel fire in US territory in history.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations are usual, especially those Korean ones, I do apologise. And places, of course, was all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World. But if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime, sorry that's the dogs in the background, and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast as a thank you, if you wish of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this channel on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by the basic copyright of Mark the Medium.